Alright, hey everybody, and welcome back to the next coalition. Revisited, yeah, that's what it's called. I mentioned it briefly in the last one, which was about Eastern Bloc, I want to say. I did say that I wanted to do Red Dragons first, but then I felt like I need to play more games to understand the deck better. And I think I do understand it quite well now. Not doesn't necessarily change my opinion on how strong or rather weak this deck is, but I think it allowed me to understand better how to play this deck to more or less the best extent as it is possible. God, that was horrible English. As well as possible, I suppose. You know, you're not gonna win tournaments with Red Dragons or something along those lines, or not a whole lot. But I think extracting as much out of it as possible. So, Red Dragons, North Korea and China. Let's start off with logistics. It's unfortunate that their only trucks are 15 points, so they don't have any 20 point or 30 point supply trucks, which I personally prefer. Any truck is better than no truck, of course. You may like it, you may not like it that they only have 15 point trucks. It's not really a deal breaker, but it's these small little things sometimes. The BY 5020 TSL is actually kind of a nice Jeep. It's the only Jeep. I think this one and the Humvee are pretty much the unique Jeeps, as in the Humvee having 10 HP and a Browning, which is honestly quite a big deal. And the BY, the boat Jeep, being able to swim, which is really nice. It's obviously not gonna be useful in every map, like Plunging Valley, Highway to Seoul. There's no water whatsoever. But on others, like let's say Hell in the Wars, yeah, Hell, nah, oh no, but I guess D-Day, for example, and I think mostly team maps, this can be useful at times. It does have lower availability, but when you're playing Red Dragons, you still get 5 of them per card, I believe, which is enough in my opinion. Your normal infantry CVs, they don't have any noteworthy transports, as helicopters both have only the slow and clunky Mi-8s with bad rocket pods, and ground transports, they're alright. The ZZZ is actually a pretty good tank CV. It's relatively cheap. You get 2 top armor. It's not as low as, let's say, a Centurion. It's not like a Leopard 2 or Abrams CV. When sometimes you want the really heavy tank CVs, that can really survive a lot of artillery with 3 top armor. But it is still good enough, and it is more of a tank CV that you probably rather use in 1v1 scenarios. But compared to an Abrams or Leopard 2 CV, it offers the it's still cheap enough that you're not gonna, it doesn't cost you half a leg to buy this just as a base CV or something. It would be nice to obviously have the option to also have a heavier tank CV for team games, but other than that, very solid, or probably even good tank CV. I can't recommend the John Mahou because it has only 1 top armor. Other CVs are pretty standard, not really noteworthy. Alright, infantry. Only 1 ATGM squad, the Bantank Fagot. No. I mean, you could do like some sort of fancy stuff, spam them, with 5-point transports, and put like 4 squads of 4, some stacks of 4 in like a town, But it's just also very hard to fit in, It's not. It's honestly like they're not necessarily horrible, but it's just for as niche as they are, which is, like I said, just put 3 or 4 stacks of them into towns or something, or just spam them over the whole map. For that niche, you just can't fit them in. They're not necessarily bad, but they don't fill the same slot as something like a Milan 2, Milan 3, Conquers M, etc. So them being the only ATGM squads, not very good, In a mech deck, or maybe a motorized deck, but I think mostly really a mech deck, in a 5-pointer, I think it can easily be worth putting in a card of them, Again, there's this little niche, and it's the only zoning tool that you really have. So outside of that, no, they're bad. They're just alright. They're honestly not quite as good as something like Motosreki. Because they have a worse MG. They have more accuracy, but they also have less range, so they don't have as much more accuracy. And they have a burst MG. Yeah, other than that, they're fine rifle squads. You know, they have the RPG-7, which is one of the better anti-tank weapons you can get for, you know, a basic 10-point squads. As for transports, they have a 5-point transport with 2 front armor. That is the BTR 50, also heavy MG. Only 1 side armor, and it is rather slow. If you want to spam cheap infantry, you have the Sanshi, which are better because they also have a better transport. But I think the main reason, as we all know, to use Bojangsu is the Hwasangchong, the Iglabas, which is not only is very good, I'd say it's also very crucial, at least for your 1 versus 1 deck, because without it, your AA can be a bit awkward. And I'll go into that a bit later. Other than that, for 30 points, you get this little thing, 4 Iglas, stabilized, you know, they're alright, they have only 4 HE, but they have good enough range and accuracy, and have the CPTU, which also at close range can be quite useful. And then of course you also get the infantry with it. You don't really buy this for the infantry, you buy it for the AA. And the infantry and the CPTU is more like a bonus. All in all, for 30 points, it's an amazing package, really. But it really is more of a anti-air unit that you get in the infantry tab. And like I said, it's kind of a have to, or a must have in your deck. Not necessarily again in team games, but for 1 versus 1, I think you can't pass up on this. They're just your average flamer squads, you know. Personally, not a fan. They're not necessarily bad, but I think they're also just they're kind of micro intensive, as they can too easily get just killed by basic transports. Gong Babyong wouldn't be all too bad if they had proper MG sets. If you look at the MG, you see they have the same sets as Bojangsu, which is line infantry sets. So if they had like 40% accuracy and 20% stabilizers, which is probably what it would usually look like on shock squads. Hang on, is this the same MG as a Bren? I always forget. No, the Bren has more range, but same accuracy. So it would probably be 40% accuracy and 20% stabilizers, which it wouldn't be great, but you know, it would be something at least. But right now, they're not really that great. And do they have the same sets as Lekka Perota on their recoilless rifle squad? Recoilless rifle? No, they have less range. They have a bit more accuracy, but also less range. They have quite a bit more suppression, but same AP, and again, the range is usually more important. But the other important thing is just that they also don't get very good transports. The only okay transport is a BTR 60P, but it's just a 1 armor transport. At least it's 10 points. But also the helicopters are trash. I don't get something like an MI-25 or an MI-17, you know? So that's the other issue. So I wouldn't really use them. Same thing, just your rifle squads. Igla, they're pretty alright. They're okay. You also get the QW1s. Oh, I forgot. You also get the QW1s, which are basically Mistral squads, I believe. Oh no, they're Igla N squads, right? Is this the same as Igla N? Igla N. Yeah, Igla N. You know, personally, when I'm playing a mech deck and when I can fit them in, I actually do prefer the base Igla because they're cheaper. But that might also, it might not be the best idea, honestly. You know, you basically pay 5 points for 1 HE, which can most certainly matter. You know, when you only have your man pets or something shooting at planes, that's where that 1 HE will matter, or against Heinz with 10 HP. But you know, they're both very, very solid. But again, in unspec decks, hard to fit in. Yeargok Day, the base are not worth taking at all. They are, you know, if you compare them to something like, even if you compare them to the Lucian Dui, for 5 points more you get 5 more men, but you also get a worse MG, and that's really about it. The 90s are okay, because they actually get a decent anti-tank weapon, but most of the time you do want to take the Yakyandai 90s and set the special forces. And this is kind of a similar situation as to the FSK versus Fast Kirmjäger 90. But in this situation, you also most definitely want the extra anti-infantry power. They don't have any MG3, they don't have a battle rifle. I guess they do have a carbine, which is actually better. But they have a mediocre MG, and they aren't as impactful with their anti-tank weapon, that they're more all-round squads, I guess. It's a bit tough to explain. Yakyandai, they aren't really bad, but I think in general you would prefer Yakyandai 90s. But I might not necessarily be right, because I haven't really used Yakyandai 90s in the past or recently, and most certainly not ever since they reworked the primary weapons for carbines, you know. I wouldn't say that Yakyandais are like outright wrong, you know. Maybe I should have used them a bit myself, because you also do get more of them per card. I guess they're more or less interchangeable, Yakyandais and Yakyandai 90s. Most of the time you also just buy them because they are your only option for the BTR 80A, I believe. Yeah. And the BTR 80A, as we all know, is a very, very good transport. So you usually want at least one card of either in the BTR 80A in your deck. Yakyandai. The main problem with them is that they cost 15 points. While they are 15 men, one of the few squads, reservist squads that are still 15 men, you also pay 15 points. So for 2 squads of these, you know, you could also get 3 squads of the 10 men infantry. And you may say like, well, it's 30 HP, 30 HP. What's the difference? For one, it's 6 targets as opposed to 4 if you include the transports, and also 3 transports giving 5 support as opposed to 2 transports. And they also only have a 7.62mm MG and not a 50 cal like you'll say the M113. Then of course there are the reservists like the French, the Dutch, the South Korean. I think those are the only ones, I'm not sure, that also have more than 1 front armor on the transport, and they are also only at, and the BTR 152 also only has 1, so yeah. Lijan. Base Lijan, you know, if you want to take them, they're definitely useful. Take them in the CSL, don't bother with a helicopter. They still have very, very good anti-infantry DPS, especially because they're rather cheap at only 25 points, and they can at least somewhat defend themselves against light vehicles. Especially in forests and most certainly towns, they are really, really good. Lijan 90, they're basically just even better, but they do sacrifice the ability to deal with anything that has more than 1 front armor. Against 1 front armor or 1 armor, they can still kill that shit. Anything more, it's gonna be quite tough. 2 armor might still be possible because they could just stun them. Other than that, yeah. One thing that is important, the Napalm Launcher has 3 shots at the ready. I should have done this before, but let me open up the armory tool so I can. What? Oh, are you kidding me? On a second. Alright, I guess I can't open it for some reason. Hang on a second. Ah, I know why. Whatever. Sorry for that. Legion 90. They have. I'm pretty sure it's 3 shots at ready for the FHJ85. What does that mean? They shoot, reload for like 1 second, shoot again, reload for not just again 1 second, and shoot again with a Napalm Launcher, and then they actually have to reload for like, I don't know, what is it, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 seconds? So that means they have incredibly high burst damage with their Napalm Launcher, as opposed to Spetsnaz. Spetsnaz, they shoot, reload, 6 seconds, shoot, reload, 6 seconds, shoot, reload, 6 seconds. Legion 90, even when they're panicked, they shoot, 1 second reload, shoot, 1 second reload, shoot, and then they have to reload properly. So I guess what if you know how the Nanayon Shiki works, you know, that semi-auto loader that I think I mentioned in the armory tool video, you could basically say that the FHJ is like semi-auto loaded with these bursts. That makes it one of the few really strong or still useful squads, Napalm Launcher squads. But again, they also face the issue that they are kind of micro intensive, especially for their cost. So you have to be careful. But they're still very useful in my opinion. But again, also kind of hard to fit in sometimes. Whoops. I would prefer them personally. I prefer them in the WZ551, not only because for 15 points this thing is fucking amazing, but also because this gives them the ability to, keep that thing behind. Don't let it don't send it into the enemy immediately to die, but keep it a bit behind. And if Legion 90, especially in the forest, should run into a horde of 5-point transport or something, the WC551 can help with that. But CSR is also fine in my opinion. Just I wouldn't bother with helicopters, because if you use helicopters with your infantry, they're usually like your frontline infantry, or for them to sneak behind or anything like that. And Legion 90 without an anti-tank weapon, they can't really do much that far ahead. Lucian Okay, let me get this right out. The base Lucian are literally Modschützen clones for 5 points more. You may wonder, but hey, Razzmann, they are actually even worse. They're actually, if you look at the MG, lower rate of fire. No, they have the same rate of fire. It's just the ammo consumption that is different, okay? Just believe me when I say that the Type 81, DPS wise, be it panicked, shaken, or whatever, is exactly the same as the RPK, okay? So for all intents and purposes, the Lucian are literal copies of Modschützen when it comes to 95% of the practical uses, or 99 even. Of course they have 2 more rockets on the RPG-7 or Type 69, and they do use a bit less ammo, so they technically have more shots for the MG, but both of these virtually never matters, okay? Alright, so we got this out of the way. Of course they have different transports. The base ones, not really. I guess they do have a very good 5-pointer, with the CSD-63C, fast, 2 front armor, 2 side armor, 50 cal. Pretty good. The rest is not really worth mentioning. Lucian 90 is probably the ones you will use most of the time. They are a bit more affordable than the Yeagok and Yakyon days, especially since they have a 5-pointer today as well. No, they don't. It's not really a great anti-tank weapon, only 21 AP. It's just, it is good, but it's not really, Apellas level, or God forbid 8012T, or the, what's it called? Strill something, the Yugoslav. This thing, the M90. But it is alright. Personally, I like to use them in the CS90, which is again an amazing transport. Medium optics, 4 front armor, good autocannon for 15 points. You don't really notice how strong it is because it doesn't come with like 10-point infantry, but it's still very good. 5-pointers also serviceable. Unfortunately, they don't get any wheeled transports. Again, I personally like to use them as well because I'm also running 1 card of Yakyon Day 90, but at 50 points and only like 8 per card, they're not quite affordable yet, and you can easily run out. And sometimes you also just want the rate of fire, the 20 RPM on your Lucian 90. Strela obviously useless. Tankasaso, no Tankasaso 85, they're pretty good. I would always run them in the WC551. They're very good for openers, because if you run into your opponent's wheeled opener, sometimes you can also just unload them just before the town or in the middle of the road, and the range allows them to basically already shoot the enemy transport or wheeled units as well that are often lightly armored. So that is useful. 16 AP means that I can one-shot 2 armor, which is a lot of wheeled transports or wheeled units. Not the AMX-10, it has 3 front armor, but I believe a shot will at least stun full HP AMX-10 because it gets set to 1 HP. I might be wrong here. In any case, defensively they're good. 5 HP means they don't instantly die like ATGM squads. Yeah, obviously they are kind of like a substitute for ATGM squads, but not really. They're kind of unique, kind of niche, but they're good for what they do. I wouldn't say that they're mandatory. I didn't use them for a while. If you saw the recent videos and put them later back in later, yeah, they're pretty darn all right. And WC551, and it also gives you a cheap-ish option to get a WC551, which is again very good. So a good combination. I went over these again. Same issue here with these reservists, and the Shanxi. Basically Modus Reiki. They have very good 5-point transport. Wrong. No, there it is. Yeah, very good 5-point transport. Makes it a very, very solid combination. Sanchi 85 in general, only really useful running for the CSD 90. I haven't done it myself. I feel like it's tough to fit in. I'll show you my deck after this. It's tough to fit in, but certainly a very good combination. It's very similar to the TH495 combination of Canada, but I think the fact it can be a bit tough to fit in my opinion, at least for my deck. I think I might consider trying this out instead of my card of Lucian 90, because they at least bring a 20 AP anti-tank weapon, which isn't quite accurate, but you know, it's also kind of cheap. So good combination, because the CS9 is just very good. Support. Basically everything, you know, I'm gonna say it straight ahead. Basically everything artillery related is pretty bad except for the mortars and the BM24, the Chinese BM24. I think the Tokshan, this one here, they got some weird buffs. They're kind of memey. They don't have like some of them have like 20 seconds aim time, so they're not quite as bad anymore. But it's honestly kind of a meme. Coxon, you know, it's 9 HE instead of 10, like the Mister, so not really that great. And the rest, these are memes. You know, don't bother taking them. So the only besides of the mortars, which are perfectly fine, the only good artillery is really the BM24. It's cheap. It has just enough HE and suppression that it's good, even when you're using it alone. You might want to use it like not at max range, then it's a bit inaccurate, you know, and then a single one might not be very consistent. Other than that, very, very useful. Even in 1v1, it doesn't take a whole lot of supplies. I think if you've seen some of the Red Dragons matches that I uploaded or casted, I've used it several times. And you know, team games 1v1s in both scenarios, perfectly fine. Anti-air. So Red Dragons has a bit of a honey. No, let me restart it. I did say that the Hwasong Jong is basically needed, because otherwise anti-air is very awkward. You know? It doesn't have to be this way, of course, you know. But what I'm saying this because you can basically get away with only using 2 cards of AA in your support tab. In most decks, or many decks, use 3, I'd say, and that's the HQ7 and HQ61. Now, if those were really your only AA pieces, you know, ignoring the Hwasong Jong, this was, I think most would agree that at least for 1v1, this would be very awkward. HQ7 only 4 shots, HQ61 only 2 shots. You know, you always have to have supply trucks near them. And if you don't, then they can easily just, you know, and even if you do have that nearby 4 shots and then they have to reload for 20 seconds, it could be, you know, abused. And even if you have 2 nearby, you know, if they shoot at the same time at the same target and maybe they waste the missiles, you know, I think you get the point. You know, them having only 4 and 2 missiles respectively can be very awkward at times. You know, in team games, you know, it's a bit easier to get away with that, you know. But I think especially in a 1v1 it could be awkward. So, you know, that's why I think, you know, if it wasn't for the Hwasong Jong, you'd probably put in something like maybe just a PGC 88 to have something cheap-ish that is just good enough. Maybe a Pongay 3, maybe even a PGC 95 or some manpads, you know. But the Hwasong Jong being so cheap, you know, that you can like buy 3 or 4 of them, you know, and even if you buy like 4 Hwasong Jongs, that's 120 points, you didn't actually spend 120 points on AA, you also spent it on kind of flank defense, because the CBTU again can deal with lightly armored transports, and you also of course get infantry with it. So that makes the whole thing a lot more you know, sufferable, and that's why I think you can easily get away with only these 2 AA units, which are both amazing, by the way, of course, in your support tab. The other support units in Australia 1, I never really used it. It's honestly not that bad, but obviously also only 4 shots. But 25 points, fully stabilized, wheeled, fast. Basically a Hwasong Jong in the support tab, with 8 more missiles, but also 20 points more. It's not that great, really, but I think most of the time you'd rather want the Pong A3. Strata 10M, very solid unit. I think many people overlooked that, especially with the 5-point buff it got and the high availability it gets. It's honestly a pretty good unit, but again, it's not really needed. And it's also just tough to fit in if you want to have both mortar and the BM24 on top of your HQ7 and HQ61A. Specs, PGC-80 is very solid, 88. It doesn't really have a high DPS, but it makes good if you want that seed fodder. Other than that, PGC-95, very strong. Those are Mistral clones, so those are very good find-forget non-radar missiles. Very, very strong. Only 1 front armor means that it can very, very quickly die, even to autocannon vehicles. So that's kind of an issue. Kind of low autonomy as well. But very high TPS. Just a bit micro-intensive because it is pretty fragile. That's the same thing as the PGC-80. The Shilka, good for base defense, cheap, non-radar, high burst. And then the spec, it's an okay spec, but I think most of these just aren't needed because you have the Hwasong Jong, which again I would definitely suggest using. Thanks. The John Maho line is, you do get 16 AP for 40 points at a reasonable range, so it's not like garbage range, but 6 RPM, poor optics. I think the problem is that most cheap tanks you don't really want for their AP anyways. You want them for HE and rate of fire, and that's what this tank lacks. So, if you had the 12, like 6 AP and 16 RPM, this would be a completely different thing. But they're just very niche and not really useful. The John Maho 5 is alright. It's a perfectly capable medium tank. If you compare to the B1, for 5 points more, you get 1 AP, you get 1 front armor. You lose a good amount of speed, which can be very noticeable. And you lose 1 HE because lower caliber. I'm pretty sure the John Maho 5 has an autoloader, by the way. Well, very, very solid medium tank. T-70 is garbage. T-62D I think is a bit overrated. It is alright. I guess if you were to play Red Dragon's Armored, which I think is worse than unspec, but it's also kind of a meme, it's pretty good because you get it on elite. Other than that, I'm not a huge fan of it. Low RPM, not very fast, and 25 points isn't that cheap. I think the SU-100 in the vehicle tab does a better job at cheap fire support. T-70 is absolute garbage. Don't use this. Just don't. I think even against, that's 75 points. But okay, I guess comparing to the T-80 is a bit unfair, but let's still do it, okay? For the same price, you lose 1 step range, which is worth more. That's, I'd say, equal to losing 2 AP. Alright, if we're generous, I'd say. Okay, let's be generous and say that, the range and the AP, they equal each other out, so that's fine. You lose 2 RPM, you lose 1 front armor, you lose 10 kmh, and that's huge. You gain medium optics, which is fine and all, but other than that, it's a horrible tank. Okay? It's just horrible. I could get over each of them, but they're all just bad, honestly. John Maho 5 is good. T90S it's a T90, it's super heavy. T62D is alright. I would suggest using it only in tank armor deck. It's kind of a meme little boat tank. It's not really bad. It's also not really good though. It does have 17 AP, good accuracy, good range, and a bastion, but it's also 45 points and only 3 front armor. I think again in an armor deck and on certain maps where you can do some little meme shits with the amphibious capability, it can be nice and all. But I think outside of that, it's not really that great. But it's honestly, I don't think it's particularly bad. And don't really bother with them, honestly. And then these are all just they're fine. That's about it. They're fine. They're not good, but they're not really bad either. you know. The 85-2A is also, all of these are just fine, and the 85-3 is good, you know. So you have, when it comes to good tanks, you have the German 5, T90S, and the CDC 85-3, you know, which I think this is probably the only tanks that you really need in the tank tab because of the recon tank. And then there are the T62, the CDC 63-2, and these are all the other 88 and 80 CDCs and 85 CDCs, and they're just all right, really. Recon tab. BRTM 2 is honestly kind of nice little unit. It's amphibious, it's fast, it's cheap, it has KPVT, which means that it has something that can kill one armor, you know? Whether it's like 2000 meter range or 1400 meter range, whether it has 10% accuracy or 50% accuracy, doesn't really matter. Just the fact that it can kill like a lightly armored CV if it's right next to it is basically all you need. And that's probably all it has to do. Or its whole job. It's fast, it has autonomy, and it's amphibious. It can sneak around the whole fucking map. If you manage to sneak it behind enemy lines, you might be able to kill the artillery, you might be able to kill the CV, and that's all it has to do. So, kind of little underrated unit, also hard to fit in. Meme, no, don't use it. Okay, it's not really bad. It's ugly though. It has 8 conquers and it has medium stealth and very good optics. It's got that going for it. The HGS is kind of useless because you don't really ever want the unit to be in a position where it has to use it. But it's just a base conquer, so I think in an motorized deck it's alright. Other than that, meh. DR40A, kind of like a BRDM2, but more defensively useful. It has a CPTU with good range and better rate of fire. But it also has worse autonomy, so it creates a better gun for like worse mobility, meaning that it's more useful in defensive purposes as opposed to aggressive purposes. Cheap recon tank, no, it's perfectly fine if you want to use that. Not really as good as it used to be anymore. I'd say not really useful anymore. Don't use the T55. 2-man sniper squad. I think that's all I have to say. Very good shock recon infantry. Does have access to the WC551, which is very nice. Definitely use this over this thing here. C9A, I like to run 2 cards. One in the WC, one in the C9A. C9A has a good autocannon, but it's fixed, so it has no turret. Recon helicopters, these are useless as well. CTQs, they're all pretty fine. You know, if I also started running one of these, I think the 30.1. Good enough, cheap recon tanks. You know, they're about what you would expect for the price, I'd say. 8 RPM, 3 HE is fine. And CDQ, obviously, pretty good recon tank. Obviously, can't keep up with the T55 and the M84AN. But it's still a medium stealth, very good optics, 17 AP medium tank. Oh shit, excuse me. Recon tank. I guess kind of a must-have, but overshadowed by DLC. Vehicles have lots of useless stuff here. 550. It's not really bad, but it's very easily just outmaneuvered with smoke and stuff. And also map dependent. Definitely not useful in 1 versus 1s, I say. Other than that, in a team game, you know, if you can fit it into your deck, sure, it might be useful. It might kill fucking 3-4 super M's. It has 70% accuracy, a lot of range. It's fast missile, 26 AP. You know, it's a fucking ridiculously strong missile. But these expensive missile-heavy vehicles are just not. It's too easy to play around them, I guess. At least when they have like no stealth, like a Bradley or something, like the Recon Bradley. This is useless. AC100, it's pretty alright as fire support. 8 RPM, 15 points, 4 front armor. It has bad optics, not poor optics, which bad optics is the worst optics you can have. I guess maybe the FOB has even worse optics, I don't know. But you know, it's alright. It's pretty okay. 59 is not very good. 89, 21 AP, 10 RPM, good range. You know, 65 points. It's a very good gun for 65 points. You know, something like a mech or motor deck where you can put this in for 1 point in your tab. You know, useful. But micro heavy, no stabilizer, dies easily at close range. Be careful. They can have massive damage output, but if you have to attack with them, it's very easy to abuse the fact that I have no stabilizers. In a defensive position, especially if your opponent doesn't expect them, or maybe even expect a 2 or 3 stack, sometimes you can catch your opponent off guard. They can kill a shit ton of stuff, but if you have to attack with them, that's basically impossible. And again, if your opponent knows that you have them or where they are or expects them, they can also be very easily dealt with. And then you have paid 65 points for something that does like one shot or something. So not bad, not at all, but difficult to use, I'd say, and pretty micro intensive. AC-76 and medium optics. I'm still convinced that it's actually a pretty good unit, but 2 HE, bad accuracy, bad range. And again, medium optics for fucking 10 points in a vehicle tab. It's weird. It's just a weird little unit. I guess maybe try it for yourself. I don't know, dude. I don't know. Again, AC-100, same thing. ATS, it's not very good. 13 AP. It has good rate of fire and medium optics, but bad. I don't know, dude. No, it's not very good. If it had more armor, it would be a different thing, but it gets too easily killed by autocannons. T-55, flame tank, this is the thing you'd expect. And I guess this is kind of, if you want the WC 550 in your 1 versus 1 leg, I guess the CDF 89 is the thing that you should probably take instead. It's kind of like a little slightly worse, toned down version of it. More affordable, less range, less accuracy, less AP. Especially the accuracy, I think, is the biggest deal here. But I think if you want like a really long range vehicle ATGM for some reason, in your 1 versus 1 deck, this would be what you want to take. I think if you're playing mech or something, that can be pretty strong, because 50 points is kind of affordable, and with the veterancy bonus, it can get quite accurate, so not a worst tech. Not at all. Basically every red formation seems to have them. I'm not a fan of them, but they have 5 front armor, so it's tough to kill them with the rocket bots. So they make alright base defense, but they have horrible DPS, both for ground and air. Most of these are useless. The AG-17, most of the time it just dies and does nothing, probably. But like defensively, if your opponent like overextends with a few units and can't get line of sight on this, massive DPS against infantry, like ridiculous amounts of DPS. Okay, so if you have 1 point left in your helicopter tab, and you can put it into your helicopter tab, and the AG-17 might be worth a shot. MI-25 is another. It's just a Hind, right? It's the MI-24D transport or MI-25 transport for the Czechs, the Germans, the Soviets, just as a pure helicopter. That's just it. Obviously, the main issue is most of the time, if you take the MI-25 or 24D in Eastern Bloc, Entente, or Soviets, you usually get them with Spetsnaz, GRU, Specialny Jednotki, especially Specialny Jednotki. I think those 2 squads are probably the most used squads in the transport MI-25. So they come on veteran or maybe even elite. The MI-25 does not here in the helicopter tab, obviously, unless you play airborne. So that can be very noticeable, but Jesus, I think I'm talking a bit too fast. It's still just useful for like dealing with lightly armored stuff on flanks behind the lines, or if you want to heal the rush, which you shouldn't. But yeah, it's all right. All the other things here are trash, by the way. The hot, I've used this quite a good amount in my 1 versus 1 deck, and I think it's pretty much copy, like a literal copy of the French Gazelle hot. Like both are gazelles. It's if you can fit it in a 1 versus 1 deck, it can be very useful. You have to micro it a bit because you only get 4 missiles, but it can be very good at even just holding your enemy's tanks at bay if they don't have AA nearby, or just dealing with IFVs. That's 40 points if you kill 2 TH495s. That's already 40 points back in. and you have 2 missiles left if both of them hit. Or if your opponent retreats a damaged tank, you might be able to get a shot on it and finish it off, you know. Don't underestimate these little fuckers. Alternatively, you can use this. It costs 50% more. It's a bit slower, but also has more HP, but also more range, more accuracy, more AP. I haven't really used it recently myself. On paper, it doesn't look too bad. It's like a ghetto Seahawk, right? That has the Hellfire. So it's not really bad. But I think the extra 20 points can be a bit off-putting, especially because when you buy a helicopter like this, I think you also kind of buy it with the back, like in your mind, you're like, there's a good chance that when it arrives, it's probably just gonna instantly die to some AA or something, right? So at 40 points, like losing a hot Gazelle Hunt is not really a huge deal, but 60 points for a C9A, that's a bit more that you lose there. So I think that's the thing you have to keep in mind. And then we have the TY90. It's like, I think people often look at it and are like, boy, that's such a good anti-helicopter, 8 missiles, 6 HE, good range, it's fast. Yes, that's correct. But it has no optics. And it has just missiles for 90 points. Right? It is a one-trick pony for 90 points. A niche one-trick pony at that. So let's say you open with a T190 because you or your teammate are doing a helicopter drop. Okay. You fly to the town where you're gonna land and there are no enemy helicopters. Great. You land, you did your airdrop. Right. What now? C9A is useless. Not 100% useless, of course. You could, I don't know, put it at a flank or something, or be a bit more aggressive, or park it a bit behind lines. Maybe it can get a missile off a plane. But for all intents and purposes, let's be real here, in at least 80% of the cases, it's probably going to be useless in that scenario. So you paid 90 points for a unit that has probably no significant impact anymore. Let's take a look at other helicopters. Let me also add that most of the time, you're not going to need more than 4 or 5, maybe 6 missiles, alright? Let's take a look at something like a DAP. For 25 points less, you get medium optics, which means that you already basically have your scout helicopter as well within the anti-air helicopter. You have less missiles, you have less range, and you have less HE. Basically worse missiles. It has 10% more accuracy, but let's say they're just worse missiles, right? Because for all intents and purposes they are. Now here's the deal. When you're doing a helicopter opener, your helicopters are gonna fly towards your enemy helicopters. What does it mean? Those 350 meter, that 350 meter range difference is gonna be bridged within like half a second or something. So basically that range difference is most of the time honestly not really a big deal. Especially because the DAP is also fast. Even if the opponent shouldn't fly towards you, the DAP is fast. So it can close that bridge pretty quickly. And then, if the opponent has no helicopters, for 65 points, 25 points less, you at least had your scout helicopter, which you might have bought otherwise if you were to open up with T190. But you still have the autocannons. And trust me, the autocannons, they are ridiculously strong. Most of the time you're not gonna use them aggressively as like fire support because AA is gonna kill it, but it's most certainly good enough for flanks. And the medium optics allows you to also spot like infantry or something that might try to sneak around. So it's not useless after the opener, is my point. The C9A T190, if it doesn't kill any helicopters at the start, it is most of the time useless after the opener. And that also costs 90 points. Something like a Gazelle Celtic, you know, it's still kind of expensive, but it's still 20 points less, right? Or like a Bow 105. It's not the best one, but at least it's just 50 points. But that's why I think the MI24V, the DAP, the Sokol, they're just so better because they more or less do the same job, not only for less, but they also do other jobs as well on top of it. or the Zephyr E doesn't have the optics, but it has autocannon and rocket pods, and it's still fast and also has 6 HP. So that's why the T190. I think in a team game you can most certainly put it in. You know, it's not a bad or useless unit really, or like a unit that I'd say don't use it. But in a 1 versus 1 deck, I would not put it in. And in team games, it's right. Like it's not. I'm not saying don't use this unit at all, but I'm mostly saying it isn't really as great as people sometimes make it out to be. Especially also the optics thing is gonna be a problem if you have to face tigers or ninjas. So yeah. If it had like 4 missiles and it was like 75, 80 points, it would be better. Wouldn't be great because it would probably still have to be rather expensive because of how strong the missiles are, but it would be better. You know, you most of the time just pay for a whole lot of nothing. And lastly, the air tap. No, it's bad. B5, it's still B5. Like it's kind of a meme, but it's also kind of not that bad. In 1 versus 1 scenarios, especially if the map is a bigger, you know, if the opponent doesn't really have a whole lot of AA, it can do a lot of damage. The 15 HP helps. The fact that it flies significantly higher than other planes also helps. It is actually a bit tougher to kill by AA than you know it may look like, but it also can be quite easy to kill at the same time. Like infrared AA, short range AA is gonna have massive problems against the B5 most of the time. Radar AA is gonna have a field day. ASFs are gonna have a field day. It can do a whole lot of damage though. It is also kind of a meme though. No. These cheap planes, their role, if you want to take one, I'd say take something like this, because the main role of these cheap planes is to scout for helicopters. And if you're gonna take one of these, you might as well take the one that at least has missiles, okay? Other than that, all these cheap planes are useless. J7H, good cheap bomber. J7C. If you want more J7Hs, take the J7C. It's very similar, you know. This 120 HE bomb is better than 215 HE bombs, but 215 HE bombs for 70 points is still pretty decent. It's also fast, you know. If you want to spam these cheap bomber planes, you know, take both of them. But the J7H is generally better. Also has better missiles, which are most of the time just useless anyways. J8C, you're bad. Mid-range ASF, you know, you get 2 of them on veteran or elite, you know, they are okay, but that's really about it. This is just bad. Your wannabe Peace Rhine, it's actually just worse Peace Rhine. Why? Because it's more expensive and has worse missiles. I'm really not sure if this is like some sort of confirmation bias, but it really feels like the 75 meter less range. They really feel like that's more than it is. You know, you know, if you look at it, it's more or less the same range, right? But somehow it feels like the JH7 has to dive in so much cheaper. I don't know why. But it's also more expensive. And yeah, it's like it's alright, but it's like you only get 1 card of them, and they're the only proper anti-tank plane, right? Fireball is bad seed plane because for 150 points you have only 40% ACM. Most others get 50. And sure, you have 70% accuracy instead of 65. And you have 30 AP instead of, I don't know, 20 or 26, but neither are gonna matter most of the time. Again, you pay for a whole lot of things you don't really need, right? If this was 130 or something, it would be a whole different deal, but for 150 points, it's not that great. Useless. If you want a cheap-ish ASF, I think the MiG-23 ML is honestly probably your better choice, because it's also cheaper and is honestly just as inconsistent. Like they have this PL-11 and the Wimple, they're the same missile, and since they're semi-active, you're not gonna get more than 2 off anyways before you're gonna engage the enemy plane. And I believe you also get more of the MiG-23, so if you just really hate a helicopter, I think this is like a Lazur on steroids. If you get in range into a plane or helicopter, it's most certainly gonna die. But getting in range, especially against a proper ASF, is gonna be tough. And the other problem is just, even if you don't have to fight ASFs, it's gonna be tough with this plane to kill enemy anti-tank planes, because most of the time your ASAF is going to be a reaction, right, to the enemy sending in an anti-tank plane, and most of the time you're going to be killing or shooting at that anti-tank plane as it is evacuating already after shooting its missiles. And the fact that you don't have any long-range missiles, or medium-range missiles I suppose, means that there's a good chance that you're never going to fire off these missiles unless you're circling already. If you want a cheap rocketball plane, I think this Su-7 is going to be a better choice. I'm pretty sure that these are just going to do more damage. No, Q-50 is an alright, it's a laser-guided bomb plane. Don't fire position with this unless like you're absolutely desperate to kill like a infantry CV, but firing position is not gonna do jack shit, and it's just way too dangerous. It is good enough to, like, if you spot like a blob or something, or like some tanks, you know, it's good enough for dealing damage or killing lightly armored stuff, but it's nowhere near something like a Kernas. But it's still an okay plane. It's okay. It has a good turn radius, you know, it has the gun with AP, you know. It's not too fast, so it can only get like one missile off, but it's also not slow enough to be like too easily killable. But as opposed to the Su-25T, it only has one rear armor, which means that it's significantly less survivable, because most of the time planes actually do get shot at the rear when they're evacuating, especially. But for 110 points, it's not really that horrible, but GH7 and Q50 are generally more useful. That's probably your main ASF. It's not really great, but it's really all you get. Like, I feel like that describes a whole lot of Red Dragon units. It's not great, but it's the best thing you get, so you have to use it. Yeah, like, it has the same veterancy as the MiG-29, but you get 2 more long-range missiles, which most of the time you don't want anyways, but you lose 10% accuracy on both missiles. That's huge. Let's take a look at my deck, if I can find it. So this is my deck, my 1 versus 1 deck. Again, I said I would potentially, you know, might as well do this now, replace my Lujandu 90 in the CST with the Sanchi 85 to get a significantly cheaper ZSD. Yeah, this is my deck. I guess I might as well also try out the Yagok Day as well, right? Before I forget that. My Sanchi in a 5-pointer, basic, you know, all-round filler meat shield infantry. I would definitely upbet them. I don't think you're gonna run out of them. Again, you only really need these 3 tanks. It's nice that you get 4 of them due to availability bonus, even if you up them, so that's cool. SU-100 comes at stupid fucking veterancy, both of them, by the way. So that's annoying that you can't get them at hardened. Would be quite nice. But most of the units you see are gonna get upvetted, because the availability bonus allows it to do so. So that's one little thing. So yeah, this is my deck. I have with these because I don't think I'll ever use a whole lot of them, but they can be nice to use, or nice to have in an opener. And then in the WC551, the Liran, just very useful. I don't think I need to really explain much about this deck. I went through it, and again, availability bonus allows me. You know, usually they would be 4 per card and 3 per card. You know, I can show you this if I create an unspec red 4 deck. Here 4 per card and this 3 per card, which means here I would only have 7 CVs, but in Red Dragons, due to availability bonus, I have 9, which is basically, like, I think you want to have at the very least 7, but I think 8 or 9 should be the minimum amount of CVs that you should have. And the availability bonus allows me to do that, you know, even though I have the ones that usually have less, you know. So this is why you often see people use cheap CVs. That's mainly due to due to availability bonus, or 3 cards of CVs if you don't have cheap CVs. But yeah, that's for Dragons. It's, again, it's just the best units they get are sometimes just mediocre in many other decks. That's kind of the deal with Red Dragons. Other than ATGM Infantry, they don't really have any glaring holes. But even if we ignore the fact that they have this hole, they have so few outstanding, meaningful, impactful units that are where you're like, wow, that's worth playing Red Dragons for. I think the only one that I could think of would be the Hwasong Chong. And that's not really that impactful of a unit, because aerial units for most decks are not crucial, I'd say. It's tough to explain, but I think you get the point. It's just nothing here really is great. Whenever I look at Red Dragons, I'm like, man, these units are just ugh. But yeah. I hope you enjoyed something. Maybe you learned something. I hope so. If you're even watching still. In any case, I hope you enjoyed the video. And I'll hopefully see you next time. Oh yeah, if you have any questions, as always, leave it in the comments. I'll try to answer all of them.